It's been a big year of policy and politics as lawmakers continue to navigate the biggest issues facing the state of New York. We'll take a look back at the year for any hints of what the future may hold. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. With 2022 in the rearview mirror and the new legislative session set to begin, we're looking at some of the biggest stories from the past year. Public safety took center stage for many throughout the state. Governor Hochul touting her administration seizing over 7,000 guns in crackdowns all over New York. That came as Republican lawmakers claimed shooting incidents were increasing in multiple cities around New York State. That public safety push saw an impact in the polling during the governor's race. Kathy Hochul winning against challenger Lee Zeldin, but a very thin margin. Governor Hochul making the historic win as the first woman elected to the office of governor here in New York. The state also continued to develop its response to the COVID-19 pandemic, relaxing its masking mandate for schools earlier this past year, while health experts recommended masking in settings as COVID cases mingle with flu and RSV infections. The mandate not expected to return. Plus, as high gas prices impacted budgets across the board, the state suspended the gas tax, with counties adding their own suspensions as well, and additional gas tax holidays to ease the burden. All right, joining us now to talk more about the biggest stories that came out of the Capitol this year, one of our Capitol correspondents, Amel Talegi. Amel, nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So let's first talk about the big race this year. Of course, the race for governor. New York seeing its first woman elected to that office. What was the atmosphere like there at the Capitol during this race?
Well, it was very interesting. I was at the Zeldin camp, so I was covering Congressman Zeldin, and it turned out to be a much closer race than people had anticipated. And I think that's because public safety was a key issue for New Yorkers leading up to the race. That was something that people were talking about. It's still being discussed right now. Bail reform is a very hot topic. Republicans say bail reform, it needs to be repealed, or some changes do need to be made. They credit the rise in crime to bail reform. Meanwhile, Democrats are saying, well, no, that's not really the case. The rise in crime is most likely due to the pandemic and all the instability surrounding that. They often cite that there's a nationwide increase in rise in crime. Lawmakers were at the Capitol on Thursday voting on a pay raise, and there was some discussion that the governor did want lawmakers to discuss giving judges more discretion when it comes to bail reform, but that discussion never happened.
Yeah, well, it's funny with the rise in crime rates and how hard Republicans hammered that, right? Lee Zeldin seemingly had that play right into his hands with that unfortunate incident at one of his rallies where that gentleman got up on the stage and seemingly tried to grab him there. But what I found funny about that incident was that it didn't really seem to gain much traction in his favor following that.
Yeah, that is an interesting point that you make. It's not only the man who had, the pointed dagger at the event that Congressman Zeldin was having, but also there was a shooting right outside of his home in Long Island where his two children were in that home. So, I think that he did hammer away the crime issue, but obviously he didn't take the win.
Right, and it certainly narrowed the race because the actual margin of victory for Hochul was the slimmest it's been for any governor's race in nearly 30 years. But she made it in. Moving on, let's talk about some of the COVID protocols, which were huge across New York State. And within the past year, we really started to see those relax, especially the masks coming off of kids in the classroom.
Yeah, I spoke with the Superintendents Association, and they said that at the beginning of the school year, they were so relieved that the mask mandate was rescinded. They do completely understand that, health experts were trying to keep everyone safe. But it was a distraction for students and for faculty. And if we look even further back, when students had to work from home, that really pushed back where they were supposed to be education-wise. Mm-hmm. So faculty is really looking to just get students caught back up to where they're supposed to be. The nation's report card came out and showed that students' math scores and reading scores were lower than compared to previous years. So they're just trying to get caught back up. There was, however, a joint letter sent from the DOH Department of Health and the State Education Department to New York schools, just giving them a list of recommendations on ways to stay safe with RSV, COVID, and the flu all happening. And on that list it's just a recommendation for people to wear a well-fitted mask in indoor public settings. So the Superintendent's Association said they don't really see a problem right now with those viruses going around. So I think that they're relieved that there's no mandate put in place right now, and they're just looking to get students caught back on track.
Right, and recommendation being the key word there, because I really don't think there's an appetite for a mandate. Again, it was so controversial the first time around. Inflation, obviously another big one through 2022. The state and counties doing what they can. There were a lot of those big gas tax holidays, gas tax extensions that were issued throughout the state to ease the burden for folks.
Right, and that gas tax suspension is going to expire on the 31st. Some lawmakers did want to have that discussion when they were here at the Capitol on Thursday. Again, that's not a discussion that they had. That's 17 cents off per gallon. They said it may be more of a budgetary discussion, but I think New Yorkers would really like to see that sort of dealt with in the beginning of session, so more towards January. But we'll know more as that session unfolds. With inflation, however, the Comptroller's office did come out with a report saying 14% of New Yorkers are living in poverty. And New York children, there's 1 in 7 New York children are living in hunger. So these are, really staggering numbers. And Speaker Hasty did say that affordability is something that will be on the agenda this coming session.
Which almost makes all this pill that I'm about to talk about even harder for a lot of people to swallow. And that's these state lawmakers coming back for a special session just recently and voting to give themselves a pay raise, and not just a pay raise, but a fairly substantial one, $32,000 more per year. Have you heard anything from just the average New Yorker out there on the street and what they think about this, or what they expect the reaction to be from taxpayers?
Well, yeah, your average New Yorker isn't too happy that their tax dollars are going towards lawmakers who were already making a base pay of $110,000. Now will be making $142,000. That's not going to go into effect until 2025, though. I spoke with lawmakers. Republicans were against this bill, but it was voted in favor of on Thursday. And I spoke with one lawmaker, said that she's completely happy with her pay right now, but she can understand why others would need the raise, because a lot of the lawmakers are coming from New York City area, and the cost of living in New York City is much different than upstate.
I understand that. I've also heard some lawmakers say that it really shouldn't even be up to them, that the pay raises should be put in front of the voters. And maybe that's something they talk about in the future, right? Amel Tlaiji, our Capitol correspondent, thanks so much for the insight. We appreciate it. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
All right, another big concern for many throughout the year, record high inflation, right? We've been talking about it. We'll break down the impact that it's having, how the year's economic woes developed, and the outlook for the year to come. Welcome back, everybody, to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. America's Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says Americans can expect a light at the end of that inflation tunnel. Earlier this month, Yellen predicted inflation will be much lower by year's end 2023, assuming that there isn't an unanticipated shock to the economy. Yellen was optimistic because of lower shipping costs, less delivery time lag, and lower gas prices. She also said she still sees the risk of a recession, however. The Federal Reserve increasing interest rates in December by a small amount. Those rates have gone up 4 straight times, though, with 0.75% raise. High inflation continues to take a toll on all Americans. Wholesale inflation rising faster than expected in November, as prices for everyday necessities remain at a decades-level high. The Labor Department saying this month the Producer Price Index rose 0.3% for November. On an annual basis, prices have risen 7.4%, down from 8% in October and marking the lowest reading since May of 2021. Over the past 12 months, core prices have climbed 4.9%. Despite all that, more people are feeling upbeat while buying this Christmas season. Consumer confidence rose this month more than expected to a reading of 108.3. It's a 9-month high. Those surveyed were more optimistic about the current state of the economy, had improved expectations for the future. Well, after a year that saw the economy go through ups and downs, we're pleased to be joined once again by Kajal Lahiri, professor of economics at UAlbany, to talk this year's trends and what they could mean heading into this new year. Professor Lahiri, nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So as we look back at the year 2022, certainly I think ups and downs might be putting it mildly. As a man who studies these numbers much more closely than the rest of us, what were your thoughts on this past year according to the economic climate here in the U.S.?
You know, the one variable that has really affected people is the inflation rate, as you know, running as high as 77%, has been painful to most households. And that was the worst scenario. Then the others, there are a lot of mixed signals here and there, some good, some bad. The labor market has been good, right? And so on. But the inflation was the troubling, and the prices of gasoline.
Now, some people have predicted maybe we may be heading towards a, quote, mild recession in the new year. They don't expect growth and when it comes to GDP to be all that much over this past year. What are your thoughts there?
Right on the mark. You know, if you look at all professional forecasts, they have downgraded the forecast for next year, but nobody is making it to be a negative one. But it's like 0.2, 0.5%. So we are right on the border. And given that GDP has a lot of measurement error in real time, a 0.5 forecast can easily be minus 0.5 forecast, okay, minus 0.5. So the recession, yes, it could be, but it would be a mild recession in my estimation because of it's a necessary evil to get the inflation rate down to a targeted 2% from 7%. It's a painful process, but we have no choice, right? I mean, the Fed is committed to maintaining a 2% long-run inflation rate, and it has been taken down. And only alternative is to slowly do a soft landing.
Right.
Without a massive, interruptions in the economy or a bad recession. I don't think people are, savvy enough to avoid a bad recession. So they're doing slowly and getting where we want to be next year.
And when it comes to that inflation, we've seen the Federal Reserve come out multiple times now over the past few months, slowly increasing that interest rate. Do you expect them to continue to do that, or is that hiking cycle, so to speak, kind of coming to an end here?
I don't think so. I don't think, Michael, that they're going to stop it. From 3/4, they have taken down to 0.5 percentage points, as you see. And I think they're going to maintain that at least the next 2 or 3 rounds. And typically, there's a lagged effect of like 9 months to 1 year before a hike of federal funds rate really affects the economy in a negative way. And so they have to wait it out. And this lag and the effects are variable. It's a function of a lot of different economic factors. So you never know, right? It's difficult to forecast exactly and precisely, but the overall effect, okay, overall, and that is true. I mean, you cannot avoid this. So they will do slowly. They'll see what's going on, right? How the economy is responding and react. But taking the inflation rate from a 7% annualized rate to 2% is a lot of work. And so I really expect they will increase it up at least 2 to 3 times.
And when we kind of broaden out here, kind of look at the global picture now, as painful as inflation has been for us here in the United States, it's nothing compared to what countries in Europe are experiencing right now. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so in that sense, US is a more managed economy. It has always been. But we spearheaded a lot of the expenditure during COVID, close to $2 to $2.5 trillion to support the people, right, and so on. And we are trying to handle that, the unintended consequence of that, right, and the war and everything. So yeah, it's painful as it is. Inflation at that high. The mortgage rates are going to increase, right? But I think that's of a lesser evil than high inflation rate getting into everybody's pocket, and in poor people's pockets more than rich people's pockets. So I think that is the first line of priority that the economy has to handle, the inflation rate, taking it down.
Now, we often hear differing opinions when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but it seems there's got to be some kind of direct links there to that conflict and the global economy. Is that right?
Absolutely, because Russia is a major supplier of oil, right? And so and also the war, a serious war like this has psychological repercussions, right? The whole economy gets rattled out. The agricultural, products that used to be exported from Ukraine to Africa, Asia, and so on have basically stopped. And so, it just reverberates to the whole economy and comes back to USA eventually.
Professor Lahiri, thank you as always for your time and your insight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Well, New York lawmakers moving forward with a $32,000 pay raise for themselves. When we return, we hear from those who say it's necessary. Others disagree. Hey, welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. Just in time for the holidays, state lawmakers granting themselves a gift in the shape of a $32,000 raise. Our Capitol correspondent Amel Talegi has that story.
Right now, lawmakers are at a base pay of $110,000. The pay increase would make New York lawmakers the highest paid in the nation. But with inflation at an all-time high and New Yorkers struggling to make ends meet, some are asking, why now? Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who sponsors the bill, weighs in.
And we have tried to continue to address the affordability in housing, education, in every way, and we will continue to do that. So it's not that we are unconscious about what people are experiencing. We will continue to focus on it as we have.
There is currently no cap on outside income for lawmakers, but this bill would cap it at $35,000. Could we see some turnover with lawmakers who do have outside jobs?
Well, possibly. That's kind of why we made that part of it effective 2 years from now, because people could have run with the old understanding that they would be able to make unlimited outside income, and now with this legislation you will not be able to do it.
Tevin Williams is part of the Legislative Workers United and a staffer for Senator Brad Hoylman. Williams says the pay raise doesn't bother him, and the legislature can expect to see a proposal for a salary increase for staffers this session.
I do know we have some people in constituent services who are making $32,000, which how do you live in New York City with that? And so that was the initial conversation of how do we organize and bring this solidarity for some offices who have baseline constituent service people that make 70 and some people that are clearly making 32.
Republican Assemblywoman Mary Beth Walsh says the legislature shouldn't be able to vote on their own pay raise.
Our conference did try to offer a hostile amendment to the bill in chief, which would have said, let's put this up to a vote with the voters. Let's let the taxpayers decide if they want to spend several more $1 million to pay legislators more. And that was defeated.
The provision will begin in 2025. Reporting in Albany, Amel Talegi.
Well, New York could soon see a history-making new chief judge in the state's highest court. Governor Hochul nominating Judge Hector LaSalle as chief judge of the Court of Appeals. LaSalle currently serves as the presiding justice of the state Supreme Court's second department. If confirmed by the state Senate, he would become the state's first Latino chief judge. The previous chief judge, Janet DiFiore, you might remember, stepped down in August after serving for 7 years. LaSalle was chosen from a pool of candidates provided by the state's Commission on Judicial Nomination. All right, stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a moment. But as always, You got a comment, story idea? We'd love to hear from you. Email EmpireStateWeekly@gmail.com or find us on Twitter. Finally, from us here on Empire State Weekly, as 2022 closes, looking ahead to that new legislative session kicking off this month, while the Democratic Party still maintains their supermajority in the state Senate. Kathy Hochul begins her first full term as governor. Recent polling shows the party may not be popular in the new year. According to a recent Siena College Research Institute poll, only 45% of voters view Kathy Hochul favorably. Poll respondents say the administration failed to deliver on making communities safer and tackling the high cost of living. We'll bring you the latest on their priorities moving into the new year for sure. But for now, for all of us here on Empire State Weekly, I'm Ryan Peterson in Albany. We'll see you back here next week. Remember, you can catch us on 10 television stations all over the state of New York. Here they are.